we are in unprecedented times. There is enormous global impact because of this pandemic. Reality of the matter is that we've never had such a situation where borders actually have shut down, where there is absolutely no air travel and it stopped overnight. Even with the Spanish flu, it was not this drastic or dramatic. So a lot of people, a lot of countries are actually grappling as to what to do. And as said last night, the only certainty about this pandemic is the uncertainty it presents. Initially, for example, just to put into perspective, we were told that this pandemic is in fact makes children very vulnerable, or children are very vulnerable to this pandemic. A few months later, we were told children are the least vulnerable. That's the level or rapid level of changing science or the knowledge acquisition regarding this particular virus. We of course are now in a situation because of the border closures, immediate border closures. Tourism has been affected dramatically in Fiji, and of course it has a dramatic impact on our economy. When you have directly about 40% or more of the GDP being or contributed by tourism, it has an enormous impact. It has enormous spiraling effect in respect of other businesses around the tourism sector. For example, as I said to the FBC people, the lady or gentleman who may be selling mithai by the roadside stall outside Air Pacific or Fiji Airways office is no longer doing any sales. The person who used to regularly say boil EV and sell outside Fiji Airways, or where the hotel workers used to hang out, no longer is having any sales because of the fact that those people aren't going to work. So that's the level of impact this pandemic has had in terms of our labor, or in terms of work availability, and indeed in terms of unemployment. So that's obviously one of the things we took into account. The uncertainty we took into account. The other aspect we took into account was the fact that how Fiji has been able to deal with this pandemic. The reality of the matter is that we are actually COVID contained. It's been over 90 days or so now where we have not had any new COVID case, bar those ones in the quarantine areas. And the quarantine areas are very strictly, guarded. Nobody escapes like in some countries where they actually run off into the middle of the night or cut off the fence and run away. And in fact, I'd like to say, in our discussions, we've been talking with our counterparts in Australia, in New Zealand, and various other parts of the world, where they're now trying to replicate what Fiji is doing in respect of using the RFMF. If you now see in some of the Australian facilities actually bringing in military personnel because they bring a particular level of discipline. I was informed just a few days ago in one of the quarantine areas, one of the hotels, they'd use a private security firm to maintain the so-called bubble, and people are actually allowing their spouses to come in during the night. That won't happen with the RFMF guarding the quarantine areas. So people are now trying to replicate that. As a result of that drastic decision, what was considered drastic decision by some at that point in time, whether it was a lockdown of Suva, lockdown of Lautoka, lockdown of certain areas in Vanuatu, it has put us in a position where we can declare ourselves to be COVID contained. We're the only independent country in the South Pacific that actually has a WHO certified testing lab. The other ones are in the French territories of New Caledonia and Tahiti. And in Northern Pacific, I think one of the other countries has it. So that obviously brings a particular level of credibility to your protocols. You've developed particular level of credibility in respect of your ability to talk to other countries and say, look, let's engage now. Let's have this bulla bubble now. So that was, of course, one of the considerations. The other consideration, of course, so Mark Helby coming in. Obviously the garment industry, a lot of people just simply talk about tourism. The garment industry has been affected also. Orders have dwindled away. He makes rugby jerseys. When there's no rugby games being played, nobody wants jerseys. When Auckland and Sydney are in lockdown, people aren't going out to do retail shopping. If garment factories are making clothes for people for their own use, they're not going to buy it. There's nobody there to buy it. So some factories, are working only 1 day a week, 2 days a week. Some people are working only once a fortnight. So these are all the aspects that we've actually taken into consideration. And also, they say some of the best opportunities come out in crisis situations. And it's given us the ability to be able to completely re-look at the entire, structures that we have, economic structures we have. Regarding, of course, in this case, taxation. There's over 1,600 line items in the tariff code that actually has been reduced or has been, made 5%, essentially. Now, for us, this meant, at the moment, because sales are down in any case, the reality of the matter is that nobody's actually coming through the borders as tourism numbers. So it's not like saying, well, we had $200 departure tax, now we've made $100, and therefore we'll get only 50% of the revenue. Well, there's no revenue in the first place. But the reality of the matter is we have to position ourselves now, because when, and there will be a stage, God willing, that things will go back to normal, whatever the new norm is going to be when borders actually are going to open up, every person, every destination will be trying to come back into the market with vengeance. You would have already seen, 4-star hotel, Phuket, $99 US for 5 nights. I don't know whether they had meals thrown in too. But we had discussions through some third parties in hotels in Bali. They said when they open up, our 5 stars are really going to go down to what they call basement prices. They'll throw in meals, they'll throw in all sorts of things just to get a share of the market. So what we are trying to do is trying to capitalize on our brand. Fiji actually has a good brand. And, in terms of your climate credentials, and now, of course, your COVID-19 credentials, third-party validation is always very good. UK has just announced that anybody coming to Fiji or returning from Fiji does not have to go into quarantine when they go back to UK. I wish UK was very close, around the corner. I could have all the UK tourists coming through in a bulla bubble. But these are all the things that we have actually taken into consideration and account, and therefore we've developed a particular policy strategy in respect of the budget. A lot of people are simply talking about the tax cuts, etc., but there's a more sort of deeper, structural approach we've taken. And one of them, of course, if you look at the individual spend in the ministries, a lot of the ministries have had a cut. Some of them have been substantial. Some of them have been actually insignificant, a couple of thousand or 100,000 here. But ministries like agriculture have had an increase. Ministry of Women Poverty Alleviation has had an increase. We've had the police that's had an increase. Ministry of Forestry has had an increase. And there are sort of strategic reasons to why we've increased their funding. Obviously the police, most people, if you talk to your staff and people they don't want the curfews lifted. They believe that, there could be more robberies, there could be people who want to feel safe, because they think because of increased unemployment, people will be more prone to those type of law and order, disruptions. So obviously you need to get more police officers out. We've been trying to modernize. We've got a 5-phase approach. We now fulfill the second phase. Funding has been given for that. About 900 special constables are being regularized over a period of time. We have, about over 200 who are now moving up to the next rank. You have to budget for that. About 130 odd police officers will now be recruited, new police officers. Get more people on the beat, gives people confidence. People go out and spend money. They know they can walk the streets. So this whole psychology of it is what's critically important. Agriculture, obviously, there's a lot more people now planting. I was surprised my wife is now having got a cabbage patch in the front lawn, not the backyard. People are getting all whipped up in this sort of frenzy about it. And of course, if you talk around, the price of, very everyday vegetables are coming down. There's a lot more in the market. So, we obviously want to ride on that wave. But it also means that you need to ensure it's not simply a question of, getting everybody to grow dalo and not do value adding, because the price of dalo will come down. Some people may go out of business. If the price of, long bean drops to 50 cents or 25 cents, people start complaining about that. So what are we doing in terms of value adding? If you're going to have agricultural produce, you need to value add. Are you doing import substitution as far as agricultural produce is concerned? Will the hotels, when they open up, will they buy more of local produce? How are we going to incentivize them to do so? But of course, there's a lot of opportunity in respect of agriculture is doing in terms of providing, the research facilities, the backup services to the farmers or would-be farmers. As part of the micro, small, and medium enterprise concessional loan, we got over, I think, close to 9,000 applications that are being processed. In fact, it's been done for the first time through a combined, agency effort. Agency in the sense we've got Fiji Institute of Accountants, you've got the FCEF, you've got the Fiji Chamber of Commerce, and they are the three key agencies. Yep, three key agencies. And also we've got Ministry of Agriculture and Ministry of Commerce working together with them to process the applications. It's going to be a payout of about $60 million on conservative levels. Now that's going to be an amount of money being injected into the economy. There are a couple of small, medium enterprises that will actually get some working capital. There are some people who have existing micro enterprises, they'll get the cash flow. And there are some new ones coming to play. The example we've used, I know a couple of people who work in the Coral Coast, some of the well-known hotels. One of them is a pastry chef. Now he's got no job. He lives along Coral Coast. He's very good at making pastries. Now if he gets funded for an oven, he can supply it to the people in the villages and along the line, or in Singatoka, etc. Those are the kind of opportunities that do exist, and they are the people that we actually want to help. In the $100 million that's been announced in this budget last night, that's for unemployment benefits. Out of that, we've allocated $5 million for reskilling people. There are some people who may no longer have that job or may no longer be interested in that job because of perhaps uncertainty or because they believe it's time to change their careers. But there may be job opportunities in other areas. So they may need the skill set. They may have some basic skill sets. They mean to improve it. So we'll be working through a multi-ministry approach in respect of how we can reskill, in particular through FNU, and reskill these people. So that's one of the things that obviously that we've done, and these are some of the things we take into consideration. And the idea is to have that level of preparedness when the borders open. Just very quickly, some people may want to know about how Bula Bubble works. I've had all sorts of distorted sort of permutations given to me about how Bula Bubble works. Actually, it's very simple. What we have said is we trust the Australian-New Zealand health system. Of course, this announcement was made about 2 weeks ago before the blowout in Victoria, and now I understand the past few days, certain suburbs in Sydney have actually closed down. Your Liverpools, your Campbelltowns, etc. Pubs, restaurants, everything has been closed down. They're in a lockdown themselves within the city area. But what we have said is because we feel confident in the health systems and because we've got a particular protocol that's been worked out in particular with our health authorities, what we are saying is that an Australian tourist or potential tourist that does maybe self-quarantine at home in Australia, does a COVID-19 test that is certified by a medical facility recognized by our health officials, jumps on a plane 48 hours after doing the test, can come to Fiji. When they come to Fiji, they will already be designated resorts or resorts that want to participate in this Bula Bubble, and they can then go to those resorts, dedicated resorts. But when they get out of Nadi Airport, they can't simply wander around and catch some cab. There'll be designated vehicles or buses or taxis, whatever it may be, that are COVID contained, that we're creating that bubble, we're calling that VIP bubble, the travel lanes. They'll go to those dedicated resorts. Those resorts will only have, for example, if New Zealand is still not COVID contained, Australian New Zealand tourists can go there. They'll do their thing as a tourist at the resort, and the staff, of course, will need to be managed. A lot of staff may need to actually live on premises. That creates their own bubble when they're within that resort. And then, when the time for them to leave, they again leave on the designated transportation facilities, go to the airport and leave. That's essentially the Bula Bubble. Now, obviously, if New Zealand becomes COVID contained, they won't want to mix around with the Aussies, because the Aussies present a chance of them being actually, contaminated or cross-infection. So you'll have to have a separate resort for them. If New Zealand becomes COVID contained, we are COVID contained, our position is a Kiwi can come anytime and roam around in Fiji as long as they do a COVID-19 test before coming on the plane. That's the position at the moment. They come to the airport, they can roam around, go to the market, go to whatever they want to go to, and go to the resort on their own. The issue is at the airport, of course, because we've also opened up the Pacific pathway. We said Tuvalu, Kiribati, and Tongans can come to Fiji. They have their own protocol, own risk So when they land in the airport, we cannot have them mixing around with the people from New Zealand, people mixing around coming from Australia. We are allowing, for example, the survivor production people want to come to Fiji. We've already had the PS for Commerce and Trade is here, he'll tell you. They're willing to go into quarantine, pay their own way through quarantine. We've also given the level of flexibility. They can choose their place of quarantine as long as they pay for everything, including the services of our health authorities and also the RFMF. They're willing to do that. They can go and start production. So these are the ways that we are looking at, of course, kickstarting the economy. The one that's actually quite immediate and has happened already is the blue lanes, the yachts. We're expecting over 100 yachts in the next couple of weeks. And in that, we have also set up various protocols that when people sail, before they set sail, they need to do a COVID-19 test. And the period of their sail is actually treated as the quarantine period, as long as nobody gets on or gets off. So, for example, if you set sail from San Francisco, you want to come to Port Denarau, and it takes you 14 days to sail. As long as nobody gets on and gets off, that's treated as a quarantine period. You arrive at Port Denarau, the RFMF, medical authorities meet up with you, COVID-19 test, you're clear. Then you mingle with us and you can go around doing whatever you want to do. If you are sailing from New Zealand, and most people will tell you that you sail from New Zealand, depending on the size of the ship or yacht, it takes you 5 to 7 days. That 7 days is then deducted from your 14. You still have to be quarantined when you arrive in Fiji. And from the latest discussions, it's from Port Denarau that Wailoa Bay area, there'll be sort of the mooring area, if you like, for the quarantine people in quarantine on the yachts. So if we are getting 100 to 150 yachts coming in the next few weeks, obviously that's good for the economy, and that's it'll lead to some traction in the economy. So these are the kind of things we've taken into account. As we highlighted also that we looked at our tariff structures. And I have this sort of continuous discussions with the tourism sector that and numerous studies have shown that our F&B is not necessarily very competitive with some of the other destinations. Hoteliers have their own take on it too. I think that their margins are perhaps a bit high on the F&B because we should be more volume focused as far as F&B is concerned. But notwithstanding that, government has decided, okay, if you're saying it's cost of using some particular condiment is 32%, it's now down to 5%. Alcohol has now been reduced by 50% in respect of the duties on alcohol because people are paying $12 a stubby at a hotel. It's ridiculous, frankly, even with the tax rates that used to exist previously. So we've brought down the duty rates on all of that. Now, one of the other sort of overall philosophical approach to this is that if you have maybe over 90% of all your tariff in Fiji at 5%, there's less room for manipulation. There's less room for corruption. We had over 1,600 single line items. I'll give you an example. There are certain like handbags. There are certain handbags, the duty was 5%. Certain handbags, the duty was 32%. They're all handbags. Right? We don't necessarily make handbags. We have woven handbags, the traditional things that we, whether it's the keti, whatever you may call it. But they're not competing in that segment. That's a different market altogether. So, it may say, for example, a line item may say that if you have a handbag with feathers on it, the duty is 32%. If a handbag without feathers is 10% or 15%. So when I bring in a handbag, it may have a little bit of feather inside. So the guy at the customs office may say, well, you got a handbag, you got to pay 32%. He said, well, no, it's actually, the classification says it's a feather that you can see. So you have this argument, you have this disruption. You also have room for, corruption. So in order to simplify that, if you look at this, I hope you've all got this and you can go to the website. Because everything is listed here. Generally, it's all 5%. In the same way, generally countries like Singapore, you have a single rate, makes it very easy, there's no arguments. And some of these items, in any case, used to be, if they were like 32%, you could then write a letter to the CEO of FRCS, write a letter to the Minister for Economy and say, look, I should get a concession on this because it's going to contribute to the economy, yada, yada, yada. It takes 2 or 3 months perhaps to get an answer sometimes. Or you can have an argument about it, whether it'll contribute or not. So to get rid of all that bureaucracy, get rid of all that wastage of time, is being made 5%. Because these things actually will contribute to the economy in any case. So for example, code, I think it's code 84, that has all the machineries in it, made it all 0%. Because we need machinery to modernize. There are many machines that we actually require, whether it's testing the content of the moisture in the timber that you're going to export, or the furniture or particular product that's going outside. If we want to have credible products that goes in the export market, or even locally, you need to have all those instruments. Now, small businesses or medium-sized businesses will say, hang on, I've got to pay 32%, I'm not going to invest in this. But if it's 0%, hey, what the heck, I'm not paying any duty, I'll get this machine in any case. So that's the sort of thinking around that. I understand that some people have made some comments earlier today about locally produced items. Now, if you look at locally produced items, I'll give you an example of a particular company without mentioning necessarily any names. A few years ago, this particular company used to bring in rice that was half cleaned or had a bit of husk on it, but was given enormous duty protection. In other words, they brought it at 5 or 0%, I can't remember exactly. All other importers of rice, fully packaged rice, used to pay exorbitant concessionary rates. So what that meant was that you have a very distorted market. A basic food item where you have one local producer of it, I think there's one other smaller one, there's about 2 of them, was bringing in rice, very discounted rice price, putting it simply in a machine, did not require much manual intervention. Somebody picked up a forklift, dumped it in a machine, the machine automatically shed, whatever they do with the rice. The husk went on one side, the actual rice went on the other side. The husk was used for chicken feed, the other one became the rice that they sold in the market. The price that it was sold at was highly incompetitive given the fact that they had 0 rated duty, but all the others are bringing it at 32% maybe plus. And there's, I think, only about 4 or 5 people involved in that particular process. And they had other businesses. So you see, it created a distorted system. So we have looked at local production that way. There are some local productions, of course, we have protected, fully to the way it was. Some of them we've said we can reduce a little bit of, get rid of, for example, excise duty. If you look at the tariff structure, there's hardly any excise duty now. I think it may have been gone completely. 1 or 2 areas that there is some excise. The others is simply a fiscal duty. So that's what we are looking at. You cannot have, companies that are inefficient, that sometimes are producing low quality product, charging an exorbitant rate, and the local consumers use it on a regular basis. So that's the way we looked at it. And again, but still there's a lot of protection. We of course understand those companies that may have made large scale investments, there's still a particular level of protection that we provided. I think the other point, as you know, I don't want to go into all the details regarding, for example, VAT reversal has been removed completely. The corporate, the payment of tax has been spread over, made permanent over long, multiple payments that you can do, more than the usual. We've of course said that, seeing a lot of you here, decision makers in your organizations, that the FNPF reduction continues till the end of next year, the 5% contribution. However, should any employer wish to give more than 5% to the employee, you can get 150% rebate on that. Tax deduction on that, sorry, I should say, up to 10%. So if you're generous enough, you want to do that, you can have 50% tax deduction on that extra amount that you will pay. We've of course have completely removed STT. ECAL has been brought down to 5%. And of course, business licenses are no longer required. It's gone. You don't have to go and line up. I know ANZ wants to open a branch, they're going to pay for a business license. So if tomorrow somebody wants to open up a shop that sells shoes or imports dresses and wants to sell those dresses, all they simply do is register their business name in the company's office. You go and do your business. That's it. You're going to hire a small office or shop space, bring your stuff, you start selling. Make sure you pay your taxes, that's all. That's the bottom line. So of course, there are certain sort of nuances within that. If you're going to set up a business, that has some other regulatory requirements. For example, if I'm going to start up a restaurant, obviously I need the health authorities to tick off. I'm going to open up a bakery. There's certain requirements that I need to tick off. So the idea is to enforce those regulatory requirements as opposed to trying to put impediments even before you start your business. And we found, for example, if this structure is built, it's NFA approved. If I'm going to sort of let out this space, I don't need to go and get an NFA approval again. And that obviously holds up a lot of the business dealings itself. So those are the kind of things that we've done. We've got rid of stamp duties altogether. Stamp duty, revenue collection for us, dependent on what kind of transactions took place in that particular year. But it's over 100 items. Those of you who do importation, you have to pay stamp duty on that. Your checkbooks have a stamp duty. So we've got rid of it altogether. Some other countries have done it. It, of course, it's more the time it takes to process stamp duty is what we also looked at. If you go down to FRCS, maybe send an agent, you send down yourself and pay the stamp duty. The time it takes to carry out your business obviously is prohibitive from that perspective. So we've obviously got rid of that. Departure tax has gone down to $100. As I mentioned, ECAL has come down to 5%. STT is gone. Business license, stamp duties. So these are some of the key sort of features, and of course there are other areas that we've expanded upon in respect of some of the tax administrative matters. But look, I'm quite happy to. I'd rather take questions rather than sort of me standing here and you looking at me and I'm talking for another 1 hour, which I don't really want to do. But I'm quite happy to take questions from you regarding the budget itself. So thank you for the invitation. Once again, my apologies for the delay, but unfortunately couldn't be helped. But thank you for the invitation, and I'm quite happy to take any questions you may have. Thank you.